So I went to the Leo and Stitch, or Lilin or something, and Stitch, Lino or Stitch and Stitch film, and it made me realize like a really important topic, which is I think there's a lot of people who might find themselves in a situation where their parents die and they have to look after a younger child, and it's an interesting subject because when I was 18, 16, 14, I was really, really against adoption or the idea of being adopted. And, my parents were absolutely shit. But the thought of being adopted and going to like a foster parent, for me, almost felt like so much worse. And I and I think if my parents would have died when my sister's only 4 years younger than me, so if my sister was 6 and I was 10, I wouldn't have been allowed to look after Sophie. But if I say happened to be 18 or even 16, and my sister was 6, 7, 8, I would have probably done my best to fight to keep her in my custody. And I know that I would have done that because I would have believed that this is, my parents are dead, but because this is what the film is. There was a girl who seemed very, she looked very Mediterranean, but she also seemed very like American. She seemed exactly like an American, only has a very Mediterranean look. And I thought that the little girl was so cute as well. She kind of looked like a Hawaiian doll, like the hula hula Hawaiian doll, very cute. But anyway, she wanted to take on her and look after her and say, we can do it. And I think a lot of people, I don't know how many people this has happened to, but I think there have been a lot of times, especially I guess in Gaza is going to be a very common story and stuff, but there's a lot of times where this might happen, where a sister finds the parents have died, and she feels really bad because it's like, I've lost my family, and this sister that I have is the only family I have left. And therefore I feel like a lot of children might, or even like 18, 19, 20-year-olds, they might feel this sort of obligation or need to want to take on and be responsible for a kid. And I know I would have felt that way, but I feel so much differently now that I'm 38. I know that when I was young and my sister was young, I kind of thought that my sister was just like a copy of me, because she used to always really copy me. And I guess we were close. Always arguing, but yeah, we were very, I felt almost like a mother and a sister to her at the same time. So kind of watching that film and seeing her kind of play the role of both mother and sister, it kind of reminded me of how I was when I was 12. And I know that if my parents would have died, I would have done anything I can to be like, oh no, they're still alive somewhere, yeah, it's fine, I can look after her. But yeah, looking back at it from an adult perspective, when my sister was 15, she met a partner, she clearly made a choice that she preferred that partner, and she basically dumped us, and that was her decision, and we basically didn't see her for 10 years. And I know during those 10 years, I almost felt betrayed. Like all the stuff, all the memories, all the things we did beforehand, she used to look up to me and respect me, and when she hit 15, and I would have been 4 years older, so I would have been 19, that all fell apart. I mean, I know I went to boarding school when I was 13, so I feel like she felt a bit left out because she didn't go there. But I always remembered what I was like when I was 12, looking after her as an 8-year-old, and I don't think she really remembers any of that. I don't really remember it now, I have to admit, it's all faded now. But back then, when I was 15, 16, 17, I remembered it all. And I kind of realized that you think that you have a strong attachment to your siblings, but I think the reality is that they grow up and they want to go in their own direction. And I think when you're a young person, you don't realize that your sisters are going to go in their own direction, and you feel like a need to want to take on responsibility. But looking at it from a 38-year-old, she went in a completely different direction. And after the divorce, I tried to help her. I tried to step in again and again. She didn't really want my help, and she ran off to Brighton. And then we realised that she had autism and just bad decision making. And the more I got to know my sister, the more I realised that she's absolutely nothing like me whatsoever. If you're a parent and you're looking after a child, I feel like the connection between you and your child, you know, is going to be strong because you're the reason that child exists. But when it's with siblings, you know, they are very, very different. And the thought of being brought up, okay, two parents is better than one, but the thought of, you know, being a 6-year-old and actually being adopted, having a family, having some sort of strong bond with someone, a family unit for like 10, 12 years, you know, this can make so much difference for the whole of your life. And yeah, if any 18-year-old wants to take on responsibility of a 7-year-old child, you know, their sister, not an actual child that they birthed, but an actual sister and stuff, my advice would be that it would actually be far better to let them get adopted, let them have the whole family experience. And okay, you're not going to be part of that because you're older now, you're too old to be adopted. But you know, I just think in that scenario, that child, because the 18-19-year-old, you know, she looked like she wanted to go into the Marines, she looked like she wanted to travel, to do stuff. She didn't look like the sort of person who wanted to be tied down to a child, and I think that would definitely be her best path. And to if you lose your parents at such a young age, you know, it's horrible to be brought up with not a family unit. You know, I know that maybe social services would be thinking this about me, but it's not. That's different. I was not an 18, 19, 20-year-old. I'm a 38-year-old, and having Leo would have been my only opportunity to get a child. And so I do not think that they had the right to not let me have Leo. And so I really don't support that. But if I would have been 18, 19, 20, you know, you're not in the financial position, you haven't got a proper job, you haven't sorted your life out, and if your sibling, you know, gets adopted, you know, there's going to be a whole family that they get to grow up and experience, and for the rest of their life they're going to look back on all the memories and think, you know, these people were there for me, and I do have a family. And you know, it's good to keep siblings together. But yeah, watching this film reminded me of that topic. You know, there's a lot of people that might lose their parents, and they don't want to lose their siblings too, because they feel like, you know, that like this is their only family and they don't want to lose it. But I think in reality, if a child is very young, it's definitely better for them to have a foster parent, because you know, then they can grow up feeling supported and have a good influence. You know, an 18, 19-year-old who's looking after a 6-year-old sister or an 8-year-old sister, 9-year-old sister, you know, this is not a good environment to grow up in, because the child won't have that sort of parent, like, you know, these are taking my responsibility. You know, I've tried to help my sister by giving advice and stuff like this, but you know, I found it worked when she was young. But as she was growing older, she stopped respecting my views, and she stopped respecting my advice. You know, when she was 15 and I was 19, she saw George as the person that's much better than me, and from then on, you know, she basically lost all kind of respect for me, you know. And when I couldn't get a job as well, again, she just started seeing me as like a loser who couldn't get a job. And yeah, looking back from the sort of life that we've had, I would kind of be kicking myself if I, you know, destroyed my life and you know, gave up all the things that I wanted to do to try and raise my sister, and only to find out that she turns out to not be the type of person that I actually really wanted her to be like. And you know, I think if it's your own child, then it's different. If you get pregnant at 15 and have a child, and you can't, and people think you can't raise that person, and they want to put the foster care, put them into foster care or adoption or something, you know. I don't know how good or bad, or how good your parents would be to the grandparents of the child, you know. I don't know how good or bad, but if you're in a scenario where you yourself have lost both your parents, and your brothers have lost both your parents, and you have to sort of adopt them, you know, I think adopting them is so much better. Why? Because they are not your children. You shouldn't have been put in this position where you have to look after them. And I think if they grow up having, you know, two other people, you know, you'll always be there. You'll always be a sister. You'll always be, wherever they go, whatever family they get raised up by, the bond that you two have should never be stopped. Especially if you've lost your parents, you don't want to lose your sister too. But yeah, from the experience that I've had with my sister and her just like not really turning into the person that I wanted her to be, and me not being able to get her to respect my views because I'm just a sister, I think if I was her mum, she would definitely respect me or treat me in a different way. But because I am just her sister, I feel like she never really fully respected me as she grew up. And I think if a person like gives up their whole life to look after a sibling, only to find out that when the sibling grows up, she kind of forgets everything you did when you were younger, all the sacrifices you made, and then starts just like not respecting you because again she just sees you, or he just sees you as a sister and someone of a similar age or whatever. Parents are usually 30-40 years older. I know if Leo would have came with me, and if he would have lived with me for 15-18 years, he would have respected me. Why? Because I'm 38 years older than him. But when the age gap is 10 years or whatever, it does narrow over the time. And when that person gets to 30-40, they might think, I really wish you had have adopted me, because then I would still have like adopted parents around, and I'd have a bond with that parent. So I know right at the end a neighbor kind of stepped in and adopted her. I don't know if that neighbor was serious. That might work. It doesn't have to be joint parents. It can just be one parent. She was definitely a lot older and a lot more kind of respected. She had a more respectable role, or was seen in a more respectable way. So that might work. But yeah. When just thinking about that scenario, it kind of just reminded me of how I would have done anything to keep the sister. But knowing what I know now, I don't think it's advisable. I also bought some plasters. I was not going to buy some plasters because I have like two ones that are like really, really old, like 20 years old. Plasters can't expire. Don't be silly. The plasters can't expire. And then I had like 8 really crappy ones and one that I was given. But I found these ones, princess ones from Poundland. They had different in the local one. They had like 40. No, it was 20. No, it was 18. 18 for £2.50. I went to Superdrugs and it was like 40 for £1. So it's 50p less, and you get over twice as many. And I was thinking I was going to get that, and then I think actually I'm going to go to Pound Stretcher. And then in Pound Stretcher they had 100 plasters for £1.50, and then in Poundland I found these, and it's got a little blonde girl. I don't know if you can see it. It's got a little blonde girl on it, so I got yay, a little princess plaster. I think actually I prefer the clear plasters, but the thing about the clear plasters is I want to see the thing underneath it, and so every time I look at a clear plaster, I think I'm glad I can see it, but then I'm also like, but I can't really see it, and then it just makes me want to take the plaster off. But with this one, I can look at it and be like, wow, I've got a princess on my finger. That's so nice. And I don't want to see the bruise or whatever it is underneath. But yeah, I think it's sticking together now. I took it off and I put this one on, and it looked like it was sticking. Well, it felt sticky. I don't know why it felt sticky, but it looked like it was naturally sticking together. So give it another week. I'll probably need to be wearing plasters for another 2 weeks, but yes, give it another week and I think it'll be fine. But 75 for £1, that's really, really good. And they've got princess all over them.